Warning: the radio broadcast you're about to hear was made by men and for men. It may at times seem a little rough around the edges, brash, and certainly not canonically approved by papal authority. But its content may indeed challenge you to become the man, father, husband God has called you to be. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the latest edition of The Obligation. My name is Jason Murphy, and over the next few weeks, we'll be expanding our show from 30 minutes to an hour-long program to feature some incredible interviews and speakers, including Dr. Ray Garundi from EWTN, renowned apologist from Catholic Answers, Tim Staples, Rosary Warrior, apologist and convert, Keith Nestor, and much more. We'll kick off today with our new schedule by sitting down with Father Colin Blatchford of Courage International. Courage and Encourage International is an apostolate which offers support for those who experience same-sex attractions and their loved ones. Courage members are men and women who experience same-sex attractions and who have made a commitment to strive for chastity. They are inspired by the gospel call to holiness and the Catholic Church's beautiful teachings about the goodness and inherent purpose of human sexuality. Welcome, Father Blatchford. Thanks for being with us today on The Obligation.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation to sit down and have a conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it. I think Donna, who works with Carolina Catholic Media, reached out initially. It sounds like maybe she had a connection or she's familiar with your mom over at St. Anne's, I think, where you were in Charlotte recently. Put those pieces together for me.
Yeah, sure. So my parents live in Charlotte. Well, they live in Gastonia now. And my mom's the DRE for St. Anne's just recently, as of like December. But they had been going to the parish there for about 5 years. So I know Father Reed and Father Cowth and some of Deacon Tonnen and some of the other people at the parish, some of the parishioners. And so when my mom is also a homeschool mother, and she works at one of the Catholic co-ops, and she was teaching her students about morals and ethics, and sexual morality was the section they were in. And so they were talking about homosexuality and gender identity discordance. Okay. And so she called me for some resources, and the parents had some questions, and she said, would you talk to them? I said, yeah, sure. And one thing led to another, and I said, well, I'll come down for Thanksgiving. And the Sunday after Thanksgiving, Father Reed facilitated a little chat with the parents in the refectory at the school, and it was wonderful. It was a nice little talk, being able to speak to the concerns of parents and teachers as well. There's a goodly number of teachers about the things that are going on in the world relating to same-sex attraction and gender identity discordance. So that's kind of how she knows my mom, and that's how I was there.
Gotcha. All right. So it's all coming together. So is your mom still a homeschool mom, or is she kind of just, she is? Okay. So, so tell me, so how many kids, and who's the oldest? Where do you fall?
So I'm the first. Okay. I'm also the oldest.
All right. There you go.
I'm one of 10, 8 boys and 2 girls. Okay. The youngest is 16. So they're just kind of wrapping up, and we kind of lived all over the place, but most of my siblings grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Okay. So Charlotte wasn't too much of a little bit more city, but still the Southern culture. I was born in Indiana, and I was raised all over the place. When my parents were in grad school, so I was born. So the postdoctoral studies, the first job, the promotion, the next move. So I kind of grew up all over Indiana, Iowa, Delaware, North Carolina, Tennessee. And then I went off to boarding school and college. And I've been reassigned to work full-time for Courage International. Courage International is an apostolate within the Catholic Church that does pastoral outreach and accompaniment to those with same-sex attraction and gender identity discordance who wish to live according to the teachings of the Catholic Church on sexuality. So this is always chastity, and oftentimes it's a chaste celibacy as well. We also work with family members of people who are in the lifestyle as they try to maintain both their faith and loving relationships with their loved ones. So now I live in Connecticut. The headquarters for Courage International is in Connecticut.
Okay.
So,
what part of Connecticut?
Fairfield,
Okay.
Connecticut. The head office is in Trumbull, just up the road.
I had a brief stint in Ridgefield,
Okay,
so that
yeah.
might be around there.
I was up there a few weeks ago. Yeah, I know where it is.
Okay. Yeah, doing a little vocation exploration in my younger 20s. So I saw, you went to an all-boy high school, I guess a boarding school. I went to an all-boy Catholic high school in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So, was looking at that, and then went over to LSU after that, which was a lot of fun. Had a lot of fun there, but it kind of took a few steps in the wrong direction. And by the time in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s, kind of going where the world would lead, and I was trying to think about, some of, the issues and the apostolate of courage, and with the way the world, is just, telling everyone, think and feel and be whatever you want to be. I was thinking about, at my late teens, early 20s, and it, I got to the point where, we were brought up Catholic. We were nominal Catholics. We would go here and there when it was convenient, of course, Easter and Christmas. But we weren't regular. We weren't a prayerful family. And, divorce came along when I was, in my, I guess, 12 years old, at that range. And then from there, the divide, got even worse. So by the time I was in my mid to late teens, I was pretty much questioning, my own realities. I mean, I got involved with drugs and alcohol, and just really getting away from the whole, the foundation of even God, just questioning what other beings are out there. But I say that because through all of that questioning and that recognition of has to be something more, I found myself face flat on the ground, and just knowing I needed more. And that more, obviously it took some really wild turns of questioning a lot of my own realities and truths, actual truths that we know, as Catholic exist. But through all of that, it brought me to a greater understanding of myself and a greater understanding of God. So I was looking at that with courage, and I'm wondering, it has to be very similar for a lot of folks out there that maybe are seeking, and they're just trying to find who they are, or something more than what they've been presented by the world and what they're actually living and going through. And that's where our faith, and especially our Catholic faith, comes in, because it answers all of those questions when it's appropriately explained and we're brought to it. What are your thoughts, some of that idea?
Sure. Well, I think that part of the crisis, if you will, that we're seeing amongst the youth today, and I mean, even in I assume we're pretty close in age. Our generation is, there's an emptiness inside. There's a question about what's important, and we're told that, well, if it feels good, it must be good, right? So this sort of relativistic morality, and that somehow, self-actualization or self-transcendence is the end. And to be honest, that's terrifying, to anybody.
Yeah.
Because they know that they failed. They know they failed in this life. They know that they failed doing the things that they wish to do. They can't do them. And so where is that confidence that things are going to be okay? Where can my hope be? Because if I put my hope in myself, no matter how good I am at lying and justifying to myself what I do, I know that I can't save myself, not even bodily, it's just out of my control. And so I think it leads people to really question things in the world, but without much of a reference beyond themselves. And we're loved into being. We're the only visible creature, anyway, that was loved into being for ourselves. Like, we, not because of something we bring God. He doesn't need our worship, not because of some benefit he gets from us, but just because we're good. And if you don't know that, right, like that's a pretty huge formative part of identity that was really just kind of taken for granted for millennia. Yeah. And it doesn't matter whether you're in the Catholic Church or outside of the Catholic Church. Aristotle shows us through natural law that like we can come to this understanding that there is a God, he did create us, and we owe him something. And once you recognize that, then there's kind of a compass point in life to begin to build character, a morals framework, a values framework, perhaps even religion, right? And build in the sense of who do I wish to be in relation to these truths that are greater than myself? If you remove those truths, then no wonder we slip into hedonism or drugs, sex, alcohol. These are self-soothing behaviors, like a little baby sucking their thumb when they're sad or distressed, or they're escapists, right? I'm going to go into my little Lego world when I'm a kid because I don't want to deal with the work I have to do. Well, okay, we do the same thing as adults too, when we don't have those transcendent things.
Absolutely.
Encounter the original sin, the disorder, the chaos in the world, and order it by the grace of God, right? As our vocation. That's like, if we don't do that, we're failing as Christians. We're failing to live out our baptismal promise.
Yeah, I mean, we soon learn that, everything is passing away, but God and his law and his word and his love does not pass away. And that's, as a 47-year-old, continually, hopefully learning and growing, you see that as you get older. I mean, I was thinking back, this morning, just even with, I'm involved with the Knights of Columbus here in Charlotte. And I was just reflecting back on all of the guys that I was brought in. I was probably 30 years young when back in 2004 when I joined the Knights of Columbus, and but it was inspiring. I was brought in. It was I'd just come out of the seminary. I was needing some fellowship and brotherhood and prayer, and these guys, they were there. And even though they were quite a bit older, they provided that place for me, as a young man, just recently engaged and about to get married, and I needed that fellowship side. But thinking about them this morning, and they're all gone. Like pretty much 90% of the guys that I joined with, or that when I came into the Knights, they've passed. And of course, my father passed 2 years ago. And you start to, as you get older, having that solid foundation, knowing that God is there. It's just, you can't really explain it. You can't replicate it. You can't replace it, of course. But knowing that, having that faith that we, our Catholic faith, and growing in it, having that stability, knowing, because, whether it's our family members or our own children or our spouses or coworkers, we're going to be disappointed. But with God, there is no disappointment. And it's such a beautiful thing to be able to finally recognize, even in the turmoil and all the difficult decisions and all the things and the in this valley of tears that we go through, having that solid foundation, you really, I can't even put it into words, coming from someone who, was involved in drugs and alcohol and contemplating suicide in his late teens to, giving my life to Christ and hoping to instill that in my family and everyone around me. There's just, it's a miracle, really. And being able to recognize it and see, God's grace in that, and praying for that for everyone that we encounter and for our world. So, for all those seeking, know that our Lord is there and he waits for us. I talk about that a lot. So.
Well, and I think that speaks back to like being loved into being means that we were created in relationship, and maybe we struggle to feel that with God, like to have that affection for him, because we don't have him before us. Like we have affection for our brother, for our father, for our children, for our spouse, but those, thoughts of suicide, turning to drugs and alcohol. So part of after seminary, when I was ordained, my first assignment, the pastor kind of threw me into doing fifth steps. Fifth steps, for those who are unfamiliar, come from Alcoholics Anonymous, as well as Sexaholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and other 12-step programs. And there's an evaluation of life. Where did I fail? Where did others fail me? Who's to blame? And then the recognition that it's them. They then share it with somebody, right? And that's the fifth step. And he was an old Irish priest who probably had gone through this himself a couple times and had done them. And so he started pushing me into it by giving guys my number so that they could do a fifth step with me.
Yeah.
And the catharsis of letting that out, right? And speaking to those things that were in there is what enables them to overcome their addiction when they finally make that commitment. But at the essence of all of those is just this terrible loneliness.
Yeah.
Even with people all around them, right? It's an internal loneliness where they don't feel loved as they are, or for who they are, or without paying this price, or love has a price and the way to pay it is this way, or I can only be loved if, like, and you see a lot of the same things when, or I see a lot of the same things when I'm working with men and women in Courage. And, you know, there's a lot of pain there. There's a lot of feeling of abandonment and loneliness and not being loved for who they are, regardless of orientations and all those things. I'm not even talking about that.
Right.
There's a lot of that loneliness in the community because there's a lot of use that goes around in it, you know, of just using somebody as a sexual object. And I think that's where some of these things come from, where we have this pain or we have this acting out, because we were created to be interpersonally relational, right? Like, let us create man in our own image and likeness.
Yeah.
God, the plural, right? He's one God with three persons,
Sure.
right? Creating an image and likeness means that we're made to be in that communion. And then he gives us that in baptism, but he also like made us so that our nature craves it, desires it, needs it. And when we look at the formation of how we see ourselves, or what we would call identity, this sense of self, like, that's always contributed to all sorts of people throughout our lives. And when that's damaged, or when they don't live up to what they should, like morally, man, it causes so many problems. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to. I guess that's a little bit more abstract or conceptual way of saying it, but it's just so common, you know?
Absolutely. So, you know, speaking of courage, you know, a lot of talk these days, you know, with the LGBTQ, a lot of letters being added, it seems like, as we go along. But going to the primary focus, you know, courage and you know, the teaching of the truths of God and creation. You know, how on a practical level, you know, I understand, you know, preaching of, or the teaching, I shouldn't say preaching, the teaching of chastity, and the best teaching is to, so that it's grasped and understood. It's not, you know, commanded and demanded, but it's, you know, obviously it's in love. But let's say, you know, there is someone who is of the homosexual mindset, and they want to live a chaste life. But also at that point, you know, let's say, you know, they have a, you know, maybe there's a partner involved, and maybe both partners, you know, want to. I guess I'm trying to figure out, you know, this. How would that work? You know, living chaste, but the heart is entwined. There's a lot of different types of love we know, but you know, how do you peel that back? You know, what if someone comes and says, you know, I want to live a chaste life, but I'm in love with my partner. You know, how do you proceed with that? I know that's maybe more of a technical question, but it was something I was, you know, kind of, you know, looking at and thinking about with courage. I have friends, you know, some that, you know, have gone through similar situations and acknowledge that they have certain tendencies or desires, but it's a fight, just like it is a fight for all of us against any sort of sin, you know, to avoid it and stay away from the occasion of sin. So how, you know, would that be a stepping stone? Okay, first step, chastity. Next step, you know, understanding, you know, creation as it is between a man and a woman, and that love that exists. How do you put that together and maybe answer that question? Well, that's a tough one.
Sure. I think first, I find it's always good to define terms, and just it kind of makes it easier, but it also clarifies the church's teaching when we get to define those terms. So I'd like, if we can, and this isn't like, you know, a rule or anything, but in Courage, we tend to use the term person who experiences same-sex attraction, or person who experiences gender identity discordance. And part of the reason we use those terms rather than using the common nomenclature is because it goes back to this understanding of identity, how we see ourselves, right? If I see myself as a homosexual person, then, I mean, that's an intrinsic part of who I am, insofar as to not act on that would be disingenuous to my identity. Absolutely. Whereas if I'm someone who experiences same-sex attractions, right, I'm really just predicating about things that are going on within my person. And when we're able to do that, we're able to have a much different conversation. And the church's teaching makes a lot more sense because the Catechism talks about chastity. It's paragraph 2337. The successful integration of sexuality within the person, the inner unity of man in his bodily and spiritual being. And it goes on to say that this is not a one and done thing, but rather it's a lifetime of self-mastery. Now, when we talk about integration of sexuality, we're not talking just about genital sexual contact or arousal, right? But we're talking about intimacy, which is closeness. It could be proximity, but it can also be, in the sense of union in a relationship. We're talking about intimacy lived out as man or woman to men or women, right? Like towards men or women. So as a man, how I relate to men, how I relate to women. And so the integration of the sexuality is not just about sex, rather it's about identity. And it's about being able to understand that when I crave intimacy, maybe it's of a physical nature, maybe I'm being tempted, maybe it's just natural to who I am, right? There's psychological intimacy, social intimacy, intellectual intimacy, spiritual intimacy.
Sure.
There's also physical intimacy that is not genital sexual contact. And so when we start to talk about chastity in terms, I think it's important to kind of highlight that, because there is nothing wrong with a man desiring intimacy with another man.
Sure.
Now, internally, we might desire a particular way of expressing that in a disordered way, and that has to be addressed. And that's what the church means when she says intrinsically disordered, right? She's not talking about the persons. She's not even talking about necessarily the desire for it. A temptation, a suggestion, as St. Francis de Sales tells us, it's not a sin. It doesn't mar our character in any way. God doesn't even see it as something attributable to us, because it's merely a suggestion.
Right.
If we
our
take
Lord was
pride
tempted.
in it, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying our Lord was tempted. So,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But if we don't give delight to it and we don't give consent to it, then there's nothing, there's no problem there. If it's when we start to give into it in delight or consent, that it kind of drags us down. That being said, two men that are in a relationship that experience same-sex attraction have been acting on it, and they've come to the realization of a deeper truth, right? That they want to live out their faith, that the Eucharist and the sacraments are very important to them. I mean, there would be a practical conversation between them and their priest about, well, what is the perception? Not perception, but is this something that's proclaimed publicly as okay? Well, then we might not be able to live in the same house. We might not be able to, so there's some practicality things to that for sure. But love doesn't allow for sin. So if we're cultivating good, authentic love, and this isn't a general rule that says, okay, well, they have love, so we'll let them do whatever. That's not what we're talking about. But if they're truly seeking that humble experience and reception, or humble reception of their story, right? Who they are, their experiences, their memories, their emotions about those things, is really kind of the first step. That's the truth in charity. That's the compassion of charity, the with suffering, compassion, to suffer with.
Yeah.
To receive those things first and see how they desire to be close to one another and what it is that they cherish. Then we can begin to have a conversation about, well, if you love this person in such a way as you desire them to get to heaven, what price is too high? And we'll work back from there.
Sure.
And in true love, there is no price that is too high.
Right. There
might be some that are impractical, and we can have that conversation. But
yeah.
And so when two individuals come that way, like, we don't. I would hesitate to just say, oh, well, this is what you need to do. Here are the words. Here's the way. It is very unique. The church's teaching remains and must be upheld, right? But two men living in an apartment together does not a scandal make, right? Because we do it all the time in college and whatnot. Now, obviously, there's things that go with it when people have declared themselves to be a couple, and that we're with this particular lifestyle and made it known, etc. Yes, of course, that there's prudence that goes with that, and there can be a scandal, and so that has to be taken into consideration. But we've lost a lot of this understanding of friendship, which you have to have chastity. Catechism tells us in 2346, like if you don't have, like, it's in chastity that friendship really blossoms. Or no, sorry, it's in friendship that chastity really blossoms. I had that backwards. Sure. Like, if you can't have a good, healthy, open, intimate relationship with other people who you're not romantically oriented towards, then you're really going to struggle to live out chastity, because chastity is not about not having sex. Chastity is about integrating within yourself your maleness or femaleness, and to express it in such a way that you can live the love of God in the world. I mean, that's how John Paul speaks about it, you know. And that's how the church actually talks about it in a couple of recent documents. Sexuality is a fundamental component of living, of one's personhood, a mode of communicating with others, your feelings and expressions in human love.
Well, I think we've lost that across the board. I mean, we've lost that between just men being able to share and express feelings. Obviously for a long time, it's weakness for men to cry or open their heart, or to have these, raw emotions other than anger and fear, perhaps. But, just the that's one thing with the men's conference that we try and do every year. We try to have a few events throughout the year to keep that relationship going, because guys just they don't want to do that, and that's hard. A lot of times guys will pull away. We're like, we'll pull away to our islands. Once we kind of think we can handle it all, tough up, and just face the world and do it on our own. And we have to have that. So I think it's not just a matter of, in a situation of, a homosexual type, relationship, but even understanding the intimacy, just, for men to have a relationship with a woman. I mean, for the most part, that's just, I mean, obviously it's, if you can't be hanging out with another woman if you're married, all the time. There's that could be certainly questionable. But even, it's almost like it's all or nothing these days. It's, if a guy's around another, someone of the opposite sex, it's scandalous, or it's, there's ulterior motives involved, that love, that, real relationship type of love, just, but
it's
more,
a sexualization of tenderness.
Yeah.
A sexualization of male tenderness, right? Because now male tenderness is only seen in the sort of crass context of being a good sexual lover or being an attentive sexual lover to a woman, but that's not really what it's about, And I don't think we see that very often. I know, like, that was one of the things that, like, I've taken away from, my own upbringing, was actually seeing that, whether it was overt or it was implied. Like, not everybody necessarily sees it in the road, like that might not be for everybody, but, like my father doting on my sisters, not in a spoiling way, not in a giving them whatever they want way, but in a like truly doting on them as a real treasure. Like, they need learning how to do that in an unsexualized way with women. Right. Like, it's really important as a priest, and like we don't learn that. Like we learn and maybe this is where some of the vitriol for toxic masculinity comes from. We learn what does it mean to be a man? We like the soldier, the football player, etc. Well, but it also means the tenderness of the man who weeps, openly and publicly, not all the time necessarily, right? But like who's really truly touched by something and lets people know, that's willing to even, I remember a story maybe 6 months ago about this black gentleman who was in an airport, and this young little child climbed on his lap and was playing with his iPad, right? And like it was a young white child, because and like they were noting with all the division, the incongruity, right? Like, no, that's how a man should act. Like that's the tenderness. It doesn't matter if it's not his kid. Like every man should be able to do that. Right. When I was doing college ministry, like one of the like co-captains of the football team at the local university was from down and out, like down in Mississippi, and he was just this big African American football player, big guy. And two of the students got married, and they had a kid within the first year. And so she was still finishing up school, and she's like, "Oh man, I need some." I was like, I can't afford a daycare. And so the students would kind of take turns, and like seeing the tenderness in that, like when we think of the football player on the field, right? The brute, like, we're gonna take him out. And like, he was like on the line. He's a big dude, and like, tenderly cradling this little tiny girl in his arms.
Yeah, there's nothing more beautiful for sure.
And like making faces at her and talking to her in a funny voice, like we need to see that, right? Yeah. The world needs to see him acting that way to recognize that, like, yeah, we can be a football player, and then we can go and we can cradle our little girl or someone else's little girl who needs comforting, and give that. Yeah, it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, you mentioned, your father doting on your sisters, and I have 3 daughters, so I know that they need that, not just the a natural need and love, but they need to see that from a man, because what they're going to see out in the world is going to be everything opposite to that. They're going to be used and taken for granted, and perhaps just mistreated, and for us as fathers out there, making sure we're setting those standards for our daughters and our sons. Our sons need to see that as well, and a husband and a wife. The kids need to see a husband and a wife hugging, and kissing, showing signs of affection. So that, when they're presented, all of the abuses and things of the world, shows them of what love is and how it should be. They have a reference in there, and that's such a goal in the family these days, to make sure that
they need to see humble, like they need to see their father apologize and admit he's wrong to them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I apologize to my kids all the time.
Yeah. It's not a sign of weakness. I'm still in charge,
So, yeah, I think that's super important to see that example all across the board, all of these things. Yeah, but no, I certainly do. And it can be a humbling time. And I mean, I know when I'm wrong, but it also lets them know that, hey, it's okay, to be able to say you're sorry, and it's a normal thing, and we all mess up, even dad and mom and everyone.
Well, kids tend to idolize their fathers, like hero, like, oh, there's nothing dad can't do, etc. when they're little, I wonder how psychologically significant it is that a father admits that he's not all powerful, right, to his children, and shows them that he makes mistakes, and that they have to be able to admit that and live with that, and how to do it gracefully. I wonder how important, like, man, I'll have to do some research now. Like, it's got to be incredibly important.
Absolutely. Yeah. All these lessons, it's a constant teaching. I mean, it's rare that you just sit back. There are times, of course, relaxing and sitting back, but man, as a father, as a mother, it's all teaching, from sun up to sundown, It's, how to wash your hands after you eat, how to clean up after you eat, how to say you're sorry, how to say please and thank you, and don't throw the basketball up against the windows. And it's exhausting sometimes, but it's what we're called to. It's what it's all about. It's formation, and it starts in the home, because if we don't form them and we don't prepare them, the world will, with open arms, and we certainly know where that leads these days.
Yeah, they're already. I mean, there's an article the other day. They're inserting critical race theory into public preschool programs for 3-year-olds. We've, in many ways, even us faithful Catholics, we've abdicated our role as parents, saying, well, I sent them to Catholic school, and it's like, well, yeah, that's good, provided the school's good, that's good, but like the home is still the first place.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not doing more or less like religious education every day with your children, regardless of whether they go to a Catholic school or a public school or a private Christian school or whatever school, like, you're not living out your vocation. You're actually failing in your duty. Honor your father and mother. That the fourth commandment, that also applies to parents, making sure their children learn how to honor, right? And not just that they take their kids to mass on Sunday or send them to a Catholic school, but that they actually model for them what it looks like to fall on their knees before God, to communicate to those children not just the rules of the faith, but why the rules exist. Like, because of my great love for God.
Yeah.
This is why, like the church says we have to go to mass on Sunday under pain of mortal sin and every holy day of obligation, not because she wants to put a burden on us, but because the greatest commandment, love of God with our whole strength, heart, soul, strength, and mind, and our neighbors as ourselves, is not being upheld when we start missing mass for, outside of, the car broke down. I had to tend to a sick person. Like, okay, the church is like, okay, that makes sense. Like, you have a habit, but like, otherwise, be careful, because it's easy to slip out of that. And that's why she makes that rule, because it's a minimum, not a maximum.
Yeah.
And we got to be teaching our kids the maximums.
Absolutely.
And living them. We got to be saints. That's just, end of conversation.
No, that is it. We talk about that all the time, and we hear that from our pulpit, thankfully, at the Cathedral of St. Patrick here in Charlotte, that we are called to saints. And I think there's just a misunderstanding about that. We're not, it's not to be a canonized saint and up on a window or in a statue, but we're all, if we're going, everyone in heaven is a saint, and we're all, we are called to that. So it's difficult, as imperfect creatures in imperfect ways. We try and implement those things, and sometimes you look and we try to get the kids around and have it, try and a rosary, each evening. We try to, are we perfect with it? No. Do we say a full rosary? No. We, right now with the span of our ages of kids, we do 3 Hail Marys, and you look at it, and sometimes the kids, the feet are propped up, and somebody's playing with Legos, or
sit down and say your freaking rosary.
Yeah, well, right, exactly. But it's just,
may or may not have heard
it's
that.
imperfect, but it's there, and it's a formation. It's something, a reminder. Well, I remember, we were forming these memories and these habits in our kids as a reference point. Because
and that's why the perseverance is so important. I mean, so I'm a priest. This is one of my pet peeves. The screaming kids. I'm not talking about kids that make noise in mass, but I'm talking about the ones that are really being disruptive.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and going in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out and in it, and so on and so forth with whatever little kid it was. Like that was my parents' policy. Okay, they're getting too loud. They're getting distracted. Take them out. They settle down. You bring them back in.
Yeah.
You don't put them down. It's not time to play.
Right.
You don't take them to the nursery and drop them off, because we're here for worship. And if we go through that habit, then all of a sudden they can behave for an hour. You don't expect them to be perfect. We're not looking for perfect. Yeah, right. We got little church books, of saints' lives that they're thumbing through. Great, fine, that's fine. They don't have to pay attention to everything. We're working on it.
Yeah, it's just creating that environment. The pieces will fall into place if the walls are there. And it's creating those perimeters, those borders, so that as they get older and they mature and they start to receive and go to confession and start going through the sacraments, all of those pieces, they kind of fall in. So it's good to have that solid foundation, those solid walls and borders around. And Man, I don't know. I know we're a work in progress. We're doing our best, I guess. We could probably always be doing better, but it's just that, like we
All of us,
said, it's the church calls us to a minimum, I wouldn't say it calls us to greatness and to sainthood and sanctity, but they provide those minimums there so that we can, not just be good, but we can be great and flourish, within them. Those are kind of like the same things. The church sets those boundaries and allows us to grow and maneuver, and flourish, with those perimeters around us. So it's interesting, looking at it, now as a father, and going through it. And I know as a priest with a flock, it's the same thing. You're constantly calling, your flock to more.
Well, and a good way to train the mind in that, because it can be tough because you're like, well, what rule do I need to make this happen, right? Like my kid doing this or that. And I'm going to totally steal this from Jordan Peterson's new book. He gives this example of a game when children are learning. So he studied Piaget, who's a developmental child psychologist or child psychologist. And if you watch children at play, and I know you've seen this as a father, they will make up a game, right? Oh, yeah. And they set the rules, usually only a few, but they don't play the rules. They play the game. Yeah. And the game has so many other rules that go with it, but only those three need to be stated, right?
Yeah.
And that's what Thomas Aquinas means when he speaks of good law. Like bad law, it would be like the outlawing of a sin. We shouldn't be doing it. That's a terrible law. If you have to do it, that means your culture has some serious problems.
Sure.
The good law creates a foundation, a rule, a set, a court, a field, a pitch upon which the game can be played freely, so that the nuances of those things can be figured out, and it can become fun. It can be life-giving. It's not, you don't play the rules, you play the game. And children are really good at this too. Yeah. They're really, really good at coming up with these games. And as adults, we've kind of forgotten it, I think. And to get into a child's head, to get them to do what you want, you could use your authority, but nobody has control over another person, as any parent can tell you. As adults, sometimes we forget that when we're interacting with other adults. Yeah. But how can I create a situation in which they understand the rule of the game and they now know how to play the game of virtue, right? Don Bosco did this with his preventative system. He raised thousands of boys. Never once did he raise his hand or his voice. And I'm sure there's some that had trouble and ended up going away. That probably happened. But he was also raising street urchins, so that there was only so much he could do. But I mean, all these boys. I mean, there were so many saints that came out of that because he kept the rules simple, and he made it a game for them, and they loved him so much for it they didn't want to offend him. Fear of the Lord.
Well, it's we're probably one of the last families. We're holding tight. Our oldest is 14, and we haven't done the cell phone, or the free range tablet. We majority of his friends, I would say he's probably in the 5%. No more than 10%. But it definitely, I would say he'd probably close to the 5% who don't have a cell phone who are in 8th grade. And our next oldest is our daughter, and she is 10. And I would say that probably 50% are getting the cell phone. And I say that because, speaking of creating these games and in this and creating this environment of creativity, it's totally squashed because you put blinders on this kid basically, and you focus him into this little device that provides everything in every venue and every rule or wherever, or opposite of, anti-rule, where you can go and play and explore. And it numbs the mind from that creativity. And I think there's a correlation there. And I just kind of came to, just sitting here listening to you talk and thinking about, that aspect of the game and the kids, thriving and flourishing and creating those games, but not being confined by the rules, but playing the game and it all kind of works in. But when you have the distractions we have today, because I know as a man who's, had a cell phone for probably now 20 plus years. I don't know when all the smart devices came out. It just goes by so fast now, but I know how addictive it is, and I know how easy it is to just plug in and veg out, and it really limits that creativity. And for the kids, they have to have that. And the faith, to be able to pray. Prayer is creative. You know, in a sense, like you really have to be able to quiet the mind and allow the Holy Spirit to, take you through, this journey. And when your mind is distracted and can't visualize, like, meditating on the rosary, the rosary is not just a repetitive vocal prayer, it's a meditation. So for anyone to sit and be able to meditate on the mysteries of the rosary, you have to be creative. You have to be able to place yourself there and think of the smells that might be there, thinking about the nativity. I remember a priest gave, a beautiful homily years ago, just going through, teaching or trying to explain how people can really envelop themselves in the rosary. And he said, think of the smells that would have been there, and the sounds from the beasts, and the chill in the air, and the crackle of the straw underneath the feet, and just all of these things. And it became so real that kids they're not creative, and we have to have that. I think that's an integral part of prayer and the faith. What do you think about that?
Well, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that the way we learn things as human beings. We have a neurochemical cocktail and response team, right, that helps us put things into memory or desire to. So like we discovered that we've accomplished a goal that we want, but we didn't really know. We'll get a little spritz of dopamine. It gives us pleasure, which helps us to remember it, but it also spurs us on to try it again. And that's how we form habits. And one of the problems that we run into with social media and television is they bypass the interaction of reason with an object, like a book would have, or a magazine, and it plays on our emotions. And so it's just it's operating those pleasure centers or fear or whatever it is, right? So the attention span grows less and less and less and less. Well, if you have a very short attention span, how are you going to have deep thought about a particular thing so you can be creative? Mm-hmm. If it's all frenzy, then how can you truly contemplate, think about the form of the person that you want to draw? Who are they? Like in a drawing, how am I going to communicate the unmeasurable reality of this person and their potential in this painting or this drawing? And I know we don't do that necessarily overtly, but we can put the lines and the shapes there. That's fine. Sure. But the masterpieces that we think of, like the great masterpieces that people can just stand in awe of, that they can spend decades studying, like that happens because of a deep internal reflection upon those things, upon those truths. And even like secular people, I think, are starting to realize this, if you will. There's a company called Wise Phone. It looks like an iPhone, but it has calling and texting. That's it, and a clock.
Yeah. That's where we'll be going, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm probably going there pretty soon. Because I really like the GPS for the traveling that I do for Courage, but I used to be able to get around without it. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to jump here real quick because I know we're getting close to our time, but I know that there's a counterpart, and I shouldn't say a counterpart, maybe it's a partnership with Courage, in Courage. And from what I can tell, it seems like maybe it's that other side of, you have Alcoholics Anonymous, then you have Al-Anon, and you have ACOA, or Adult Children of Alcoholics. These support groups for those who are affiliated with folks who are alcoholics or have drug addictions, and it's a support. So could you tell us a little about Encourage, because I know that's an important side of that when we're going through those sort of difficulties in life.
Sure. So So Courage was founded in 1987, recognizing a need for family members who are trying to maintain relationships with people who are in the lifestyle, with children, with loved ones who are in the lifestyle. How are we balancing this out? How are we going to maintain this while maintaining our faith? And so it was founded to kind of help support them in that. I think one of the most important things for both of them, though, is when Courage was originally founded in 1980 by Cardinal Cook in New York in response to the beginning of the AIDS crisis, or going into the peak of the AIDS crisis in the West Village, was a desire to be able to minister to men and women who were there. So Father John Harvey, an oblate of St. Francis of Sales, had been doing this work just independently on his own. And Father Groeschel knew of him, and he knew Cardinal Cook wanted this, and so he brought them together, and Courage was born. And the members kind of came up with 5 goals, and the 5 goals reflect spiritual growth, understanding of the needs, difficulties, challenges that are experienced by men and women who have same-sex attraction, to establish healthy relationships with others so that nobody has to go through it alone, to assist family members and friends to reach out with compassion and truth, and to witness to their loved ones in the world the love of Jesus Christ. And so Encourage kind of takes those same goals and then places them with the family member or the friend who's seeking to do so. And so it's interesting. Courage primarily began with parents. So they'd come to us and they say, well, my child is in the lifestyle, the young man, a young woman, they say they hate me, or they say they love me, but I don't know how, and so we just kind of walk with them. And there's no hard and fast rule, right? Because what might work for one parent, where, we can be open and loving with those who we love and those who they love, right? And yet still have clear rules and boundaries and uphold the faith. And what began with those parents has grown to, we have Encourage groups for spouses of persons who experience same-sex attraction or gender identity discordance. And we have it for siblings. And it's kind of amazing to see how it's just grown out of, just a desire to love and to be with people in their crises throughout life, and try and speak that truth in love. That's the key, is in love, with compassion. We have to be willing to suffer with them. And sometimes I think there can be, the church talks about it's intrinsically disordered and we have to change these things. We have to be willing to suffer as Christ did on the cross for us, for anybody who needs to overcome a sin, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have a friend who's struggling with lust, you have to be willing to be a part of overcoming that, like 2 men, iron sharpening iron, right? Like, give me a call when that happens, no matter what time, day or night, and I will talk to you, and we will check in, and that will remove some of the shame, right? You see this very much in the 12-step programs, of course, with sponsors. But so when we're talking about Courage and Encourage, part of the mission of Encourage is to help be those suffering with, help them to suffer with them. The fact that, that their child is in pain, and to be able to comfort them. And that in no way is affirming a sin, because sometimes we get hung up on things, we get hung up and we say, well, but it's a disordered action that cries out to heaven. Yep. So does the exploitation of women and children. So does not paying a livable wage. And how many times do we walk into a place like maybe Walmart? We used to lace up our Nikes. Like, we should be just as strong about those things too. And I'm not saying there's not a problem. We don't have to be upfront and bold about it, but we need to remember to be bold about all of it. How many of us have friends we know who struggle with, at least as men, especially with sexual temptation, or maybe even a habit of sexual acting out with like pornography and masturbation. And yet, what do we do? Like, have we offered ourselves sacrificially for them? That's that male tenderness again, right? Yeah, we're going to be hard on them, but there's a tenderness in the fact that, I'm willing to go through it. Yeah, call me at 2:30 in the morning if you got to. Like, it's worth it. It's worth it. Just as it's worth it for my children, it's worth it for you, because if if I can help you be a saint, the gospel says, right? Like, what's the reward for you helping someone turn from sin? It's eternal. Because there is much rejoicing for the convert who enters into heaven.
Oh yeah.
For the faithful who enters heaven, there's a lot less rejoicing because, well, you did what you were supposed to, right?
Yeah.
Right. Like, so if we're not bringing converts, like and converts is not beating somebody with a Bible, people don't convert usually because of an argument. They convert because they've experienced Christ incarnate in you. And that's what our vocation is. That's what it means to have a vocation. How am I incarnationally living out God's love in the world? We don't often hear his voice. We don't feel his arms around us. That's your job and my job.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing that with not only the stranger who's our neighbor, but with those who are close to us, man, a lot's been given to us. It's going to be a lot of farthings I have to pay,
That's right.
Down to the last farthing, as they say.
That's beautiful summary, Father. I've enjoyed speaking with you and hearing about courage. And if someone's out there and was interested, needed, or maybe had questions or wanted to learn more about courage, what would be the best route for them to find you guys?
It would probably be our website, because it's got my contact information on there. It's got a lot of electronic resources. It's got a meeting locator. So if you're in a state, like maybe you yourself want to go to a meeting because you have a loved one, or perhaps you experience same-sex attractions or gender identity discordance, and you want to live out your faith, and you want some support in doing so, all that information is on there. The website is couragerc.org. So it's just the word courage with the letters RC, Roman Catholic.org. And yet again, all our contacts information's on there. And this is what I do full time. So if people want to call or email or like that, I want to do that. I'm not too busy. Don't ever think I'm too busy. It might take me a little bit to get back, like a day or two, but I'm not too busy. I love talking about this stuff. I love walking with people in it because there's so much grace in it. So much grace when we do the will of God.
Excellent. Well, Father, thank you so much for coming on The Obligation, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
It's a pleasure. God bless.
God bless. Just a reminder about the upcoming Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas on March 5th, 2022 at St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Church. Tickets are on sale now. You can go online to www.catholicmenofthecarolinas.org. Use the promo code radio and save $5. I'd like to once again thank our new sponsor, Harmony Home Solutions. They are your trusted partner, striving to enhance the lives of older adults and their families by providing premier aging in place and universal design lifestyle solutions that increase safety beautifully. You can find them online at www.hhsclt.com. Carolina Catholic Radio Network is a 100% listener-supported 501c3 nonprofit corporation. Please prayerfully consider a specific monthly commitment to Carolina Catholic Radio Network. This helps us budget our work and continue to bring great programming. Every contribution counts. If you're a parish or business, please contact us directly to learn more about the ways that you can sponsor or partner with us. There are many different pledge levels that will suit your interest. You can go online to www.carolinacatholicradio.org, click that donate button, and find out more. Thanks again for tuning in to The Obligation. Don't forget, our speaker series continues next week when we bring on Keith Nestor, followed by Dr. Ray Garundi. You won't want to miss these interviews. Check out all of the local content here on Carolina Catholic Media Network. Our station provides some of the most local content than any other Catholic radio network in the United States. If you haven't checked out The Remnant, make sure you give those guys a listen. Join hosts Stephen Thomas, Bill Snyder, and Ray Haywood as they tackle current events that challenge our wills and our Catholic faith through 3 generations of thought-provoking discernment. Of course, make sure to check out Faith and Sport with Dr. John Aquaviva. Dr. John will be one of our keynote speakers at the upcoming men's conference. All you got to do to get this great content on the go is download the Carolina Catholic Radio app and listen to it anytime you'd like. And streaming online at www.carolinacatholicradio.org. For the Obligation Radio Show, the Catholic Men's Conference of the Carolinas, and Carolina Catholic Media Network, my name is Jason Murphy. God bless, and Esto Vir.